We wait 1 more minute or 2 more minutes for further people to arrive. So everyone is slowly joining. Let's start the presentation from my side. Thank you very much for joining the AMPOWER Report 2024 release event. We invited you for today for 1 hour to see the latest changes in additive manufacturing that we found in our report that we released about half a month ago. And to give you an opportunity to give us your questions, ask your questions that you have around the developments of the additive manufacturing market, and discuss the latest developments in 3D printing and additive manufacturing. Let me start by a very quick introduction of your hosts today. Myself, I'm Matthias Schmidt-Lehr. I'm one of the 3 founding partners of AMPOWER. I'm going to moderate this release event for today. Next to me is Timo Führer, our expert in polymer additive manufacturing and heading our polymer AM activities. And online from his home is Maximilian Munch, another managing partner, founding partner of additive manufacturing and heading all the report and market analysis activities at AMPOWER. And together we're going to answer your questions, guide you through the latest report that we published, and hope that you can get all your questions answered today. The report is online since half a month. It's available for purchase right now at the website that you see below. So click on the website. You can also download a management summary there if you want further information. And we look forward to any kind of feedback also during that session. Let me start by a quick review of 2023. It was a very successful year for AMPOWER. We had an extremely interesting customer projects last year. As you may know us, we do most of our business in consultancy with additive manufacturing. A lot of the projects were related last year to work in market positioning and go-to-market strategy with our customers, clients coming from the supply chain of materials, the supply chain of machines and equipment for additive manufacturing. Many players hired us last year to develop their market position, either of new products they want to bring to the market or changes they want to make to their strategy. We also completed 3 technology studies. Strictly speaking, not completely in 2023. I think the latest one, the polymer CO2 calculator that Timo just recently presented in a session last week, I think. So we, strictly speaking, completed that in first quarter 2024. But most of the activities last year was focused on the polymer section. We had a very interesting study around the addressable market for polymer AM. And we looked at resin AM or UV resin AM technologies, benchmarked them versus the different types of printers that are on the market, the different types of materials that are on the market. One very happy announcement that we were able to make in the last 12 months was also our first customer success video with Nikon. It was a very interesting project for us when Nikon Ventures decided to take over SLM Solutions, and we were able to support the company in a commercial due diligence. And we were also able to get that as a public official reference. We're very happy to announce that. Also, I think about 2 months ago that was released. Now coming to our report, for those of you who are not yet familiar with our AMPOWER report and our methodology behind it, the report, the main source of the report are interviews with representatives of the market. As you can see on the left side, we do predominantly in the months January and February, we talk to many users of additive manufacturing companies who utilize the technology for their products, with companies who supply into this industry. So we ask companies like machine OEMs, material suppliers, part manufacturing suppliers. We also add views from other experts in the market about general trends and market developments. And we also utilize other public information, for example, from companies who are publicly listed and make their market developments, their company developments public. All that goes into a model where we calculate numbers in the end, and what comes out of it is what you can see on the right side. It's a bunch of charts in the end, and a few of them we're gonna preview in the next couple of slides. The charts show the overall additive manufacturing market, and then further segmented into the different areas. So we segment into materials, polymer and metal on a high level, and by each alloy or polymer material group on an even further detail level. We also segment into the different verticals and industries. We segment by technology and region, as well as by application. Those charts show the developments of the past years, of the past year 2023, as well as a forecast 2028. So we look 5 years into the future. How do we calculate the forecast? That's a very important differentiation of our report, that we talk to users as well as suppliers. So we get their view on their future expectations. Suppliers tend to see the world a bit more positive than the users. So usually their forecast is somewhat higher than the one of companies who utilize AM. And our forecast model is usually somewhere in between those two predictions. And that's what we include in our 2028 forecast, in our 5-year forecast in our report. Besides those numbers and breakdowns, you also have access in the report to a certain database of suppliers. You can browse through a number of system, machine OEM, equipment OEMs, part manufacturing suppliers, material suppliers, etc. And we also keep track of an application database that keeps growing over the years. Last but not least, very important co-authors contribute to the market report by providing a certain trend analysis, especially with a regional focus. So the co-authors that contribute articles to the report give us more depth in terms of local or regional developments, for example, in a certain area like China or like the US. So let's dive first into the numbers, and the most interesting chart that covers, let's say, the whole market development is this global metal and polymer additive manufacturing market overview. It contains the equipment sales of the previous years and a forecast for 5 years. It contains the material sales as well as part manufacturing suppliers. Overall, we can see that the development of the years before 2023 was a bit more positive than it was last year in 2023. And I want to dive a bit deeper into the numbers between that by just forwarding a question to Max at this point, who is diving deep into those numbers and doing most of the calculations of this report. And my major question around looking at this chart is if there is first of all, if there's a major differentiation between metal and polymer, because this is one chart that contains both. Max, do you see a big difference here in metal and polymer?
Thank you, Matthias. Of course, welcome from my side as well to today's event. So in the past years, we've seen usually the metal side growing around 20–25%. Polymer was a bit lower, but very steady around 10–12%. So last year, what happened, according to our data, that actually metal growth was significantly lower, around 15% only. So we saw a lot of difficulties in this market environment. Also, polymer was below the usual 10%. And especially if you follow the financial data, you saw that the large polymer 3D printing companies listed on the stock market, 3D Systems, Stratasys, were actually reporting quite a difficult year last year. And this was also, of course, an outcome that you see in the overall market data.
Regarding the 2023 end forecast numbers, is there a difference in equipment versus materials? If I look at the bars here, of course, the full bar values are available in the full report. But if you look at it, it looks to me like equipment is growing less. Is that true?
Especially in equipment and in metal equipment, we can say that. So last year, we've seen only a growth of metal AM of 10%, far below what we've been seeing before, an average 18% over the last couple of years. Saying that material is kept being bought, machines are running, machines are being installed every year. Additionally to the machines that are already running, we are currently not really at the end of the life of the machines that were mostly installed in the 2010s. So a lot of these machines will continue to run for a couple more years. And hence, every new machine that comes into the market now will need further material use. But also in the part manufacturing sector, we've seen quite steady growth, around, I believe, 17% in metal AM last year. Maybe, Timo, you can add to polymer some development, I believe, there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, what we see, especially in equipment, as Max already said, that the established 3D printing companies like 3D Systems and Stratasys, they just struggled over the last year, and it doesn't seem like it will change dramatically over the next year. So we see more the market push from the small suppliers on the market, and of course. What we also see and what we are going to jump more into detail is also the let's say the Asian market and the more unsaturated market is picking up on speed and more driving the market there.
That's the keyword I was waiting for. Other topics. I want to dive deeper into 3 different trends that we've seen in the 2024 report, looking at the numbers last year and the forecasts. There's 3 trend topics. The one is a regional shift that we want to look into on the next slide. The next one we want to look into is the industrial differentiation, because not every industry is growing similar, and there are certain industry segments that have stronger growth rates, stronger drivers currently. And the third one is the investment, especially equipment investment diversity. We have obviously a change in some of the machine pricing going on the market, new machines being pushed into the market at a new pricing level. And we want to look at the data if we can get proof of the developments there. So let's start with the, by the way, I started the Q&A session, so please feel free to add your questions. We're going to collect them. You can, I think you can like questions, and the ones you like most are probably going to end up on top of our list, so we can prioritize that at the end of the session. When we start into the Q&A session, just feel free to start your questions already there if you have something coming up. Let's look at the global transformation. We have what we're looking at here is the equipment sales numbers over the past 2 years and the forecast for 2028. And as you can see, there's a certain shift going on in terms of revenue developments from the OEMs. Those numbers are the values from the local OEM supplier. So those are not the customer side, but this is the resident side of each supplier. So on the AMEA side, all the way on the left, we have predominantly the North American and most likely US American equipment OEMs represented by those numbers. In the EMEA range, most of the suppliers come from European countries, and in the APEC region is dominated by Chinese suppliers who are represented here by those numbers. And as you can see, the revenues of Chinese suppliers currently is still at the lower end compared to EMEA and AMEA, but it develops much faster into the next couple of years. And my first question to Max is, why is that the case? What has happened there in the past couple of years, and what kind of trend do we see here on the landscape?
So what pretty much is very easy to see is the bad performance. What happened for the companies located in EMEA? So the companies that are having their headquarters. This is how we differentiate it. We're having their headquarters in a country in the EMEA region. And here we had a fairly bad performance, especially in metal AM last year. So we had larger players reporting us that their year was very difficult. They were not able to close the sales they expected to close. They were having less revenue, especially in equipment sales. And this was simply driving the overall markets lower. So year over year, just the metal AM, we had, I think, 8% lower revenue in equipment sales from companies headquartered in the EMEA region, which is quite significantly in this market, a market that has seen over the last years, as I said, growth 15 to 20% on average. So a lot of these companies are used to these high growth, and suddenly they are facing this very difficult market. Surprisingly, this is not the same for the US American or Northern American, as well as the companies from APEC, as they had still a fairly successful year in metal AM, and maybe they were able to close the sales even within Europe, as Europe and European countries and companies still were driving the sales in this area. What the reason for this is, why the EMEA companies were having a difficult year, difficult also to say. Certainly, we have a challenging overall environment here with the conflicts, rising conflicts, especially a new conflict with Israel popped up half a year ago, sadly. High interest rates and a general difficult environment here. Overall, so this is certainly one of the reasons, but difficult to say why the difference is at the end of the day.
Timo, is there a difference in the polymer and metal side? Again, in this chart, we have combined the whole polymer section and the metal PBF section. Is there a difference in polymer, or is it the same development?
I mean, what we see, especially in the North American market, that is really covered, let's say, or really pushed in some direction by the big established players like 3D Systems and Stratasys, as mentioned before. We see that they really struggle. So I think both had negative growth in terms of equipment sales. And this is, therefore, we see a development there that the North American market in polymer, or the American market in total, so North and South America in total, only grew by about 1% over the last year. So that is quite astonishing, let's say. So the smaller companies or rising companies on that market, they didn't have enough power, let's say, to undo that development. So there's a difference in metal and polymer. On the other side, let's say, of the world, in the APEC region, we see that the APEC market really grew a little bit more in comparison to the AMEA market. Especially in the equipment sales, we see that the APEC market grew by around 12%. So comparable to the metal market. This is what we see, especially driven by, let's say, the unsaturated market in the Asian region, especially regions like India, and also still other companies. I mean, other regions, other countries. They are not as saturated, and they are not looking to, let's say, enhance the utilization of the systems. They are rather thinking about buying new equipment. And for the Western market, let's say, combining EMEA as well as AMEA, we see that those regions are rather taking a look at how can I utilize my systems more, how can I put more build jobs in my printers, how can I, as I said, increase my utilization of the printers to increase my AM activities instead of buying new machines.
Talking about how companies are using the machines, Max, maybe on to your side again, is it we see here now the chart by location of equipment OEMs? How is it the other way around? How is it on the buyer side? Do we have a similar flatline development in EMEA on the buyer side as well, or is that market growing?
So yeah, just briefly mention this. So if we just look at where the customer is located at, so where the revenue is actually targeted at and generated coming from, it's quite the opposite. So we have quite a big growth from EMEA-based companies, above 10% in the Americas. It's even more than 20% in metal AM. So here the users continue to invest into equipment. Especially coming from the Asian-based companies, they were apparently last year starting to shift their attention away from the domestic borders to outside, to international sales. So we actually see that domestically we have in the model less revenue from equipment sales in metal AM domestically compared to last year. So this is interesting. At the same time, however, the same suppliers from this region have dramatically increased their sales. Some of these companies are public. Look at Forsoon, look at BLT. So they have reported, I believe, an increase in their sales and equipment by 15, 20, 25%. It's a bit difficult to read, as they also have a lot of part manufacturing services included in the financial data. But it's easy to see that their growth, at least what is reported in the financials, continues to thrive.
Talking about customers, the second topic I want to dive a bit deeper into is the customer side, the industry segmentation. We are all aware that additive manufacturing is strongly represented in high-value industries, the automotive, the aerospace, and defense, as well as the medical, take half of the whole segment already. A big chunk of the other half is still part manufacturing suppliers, academia, industrial suppliers, tooling and molding. We have a couple of different developments here, and Max, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on some of the segments that we wanted to highlight here. So the automotive, sure, aerospace, defense, and the part manufacturing segment. What happened in those areas?
So let's start maybe with the whole aerospace sector. It's about 1/4 of the whole revenue generated from equipment, continues to be quite large. And I mean the companies based in these fields, so civil aviation, turbines. You have to count in defense, because defense is still today mostly aerospace applications. Space, they have excellent applications. Turbines, the space components, structural components, rocket engines. Same in polymers. And of course, there's quite a big surge in defense applications right now as well, with a lot of funding in the US, but also we can anticipate it due to the conflicts. And if you follow the news, this funding will also happen in Europe. And you can also imagine that the same will happen in other countries like China, where it's a bit more difficult to understand how much is actually being done in defense for us, even for us from the outside. But we can assume that the same will happen in China as well, with a lot of activities in this area. The reason why it continues to thrive is these industries have a long history. They have now qualified a lot of the systems they run. They know how to qualify a new system that they buy. They know their processes. They have descriptions. They have the specifications that they need. They have the knowledge and the personnel, and it's easy for them to add a new application to the mix, so they continue to grow. What I find interesting that one area that might be a bit more difficult for today is the larger commercial aircraft. Here we hear that the larger companies run into a kind of a plateau. They have optimized everything. They don't find new applications that easily because now cost counts. And since they have been looking into optimizing everything for the last 10-15 years, they are not easily finding new applications that are really a good business case where it's worthwhile to run through the whole qualification and process validation, finding a supplier for these parts, etc. What we know though, once the new programs start, I believe still to be announced next larger aircraft from Airbus, from Boeing. When we know how they look like, then we can expect that AM will play a very heavy part in the development, but also in the production later on. So these areas will continue to grow. You also mentioned automotive. Automotive is interesting that we do not really see that much growth anymore in this field. I think we have to differentiate a bit between the, let's say, low to mid-end production that requires larger batch sizes, and the other areas, the high-end, the luxury, and the racing applications. In the lower end, the automotive, especially OEMs, have difficulties finding parts besides prototyping tools, molds, jigs, and fixtures. These are very, very successful, but directly manufactured parts, they are simply oftentimes very expensive compared to the very optimized, cost-optimized production of automotive today. So this is certainly a challenge for these companies. Pretty much the other way around, it is in the luxury segment or racing segment, where you need very small lot sizes, where you need very fast iteration cycles. Since here AM continues to be very strong. Of course, it's a small area, as we don't have batch sizes of 500,000 or 1 million, but rather batch sizes of 5 or 50. So this is, of course, then in the end, a smaller market.
How is it in the part manufacturing business? Did that market grow a lot in the last year? I think the year before. Yeah.
It continues to grow in the areas, especially when you look at the equipment sales. Part manufacturing service continue to buy equipment. They continue to increase their capacity by around 20, 25, 30%, depending on what area and what the part manufacturing service is also focusing on. Again, what we mentioned before, the aerospace sector, if you look at North America, a lot of the defense primes, they rely on these part manufacturing services to produce their parts. They entered sometimes now into strategic partnerships to produce these parts at third parties, and at least the development is running there. So these companies also profit from the interest from these larger companies that are used to outsource their production as well development work. So part manufacturing continues to also to grow quite nicely over the past years.
Thank you, Max. The third topic I mentioned before that we want to dive deeper into is the machine equipment invest. And what we see here is an overview just of the polymer investment groups. We don't yet segment this on the metal side. On the metal side, we have a couple of additional questions around specific machines that go towards platform size, that go towards multi-laser, etc. But in the polymer side, we ask users as well as suppliers about their projections and their purchases of machines classified in different machine sizes. Timo, I think it's very interesting that we see, especially in this mid-size segments, 35,000 to 100,000 euro, a strong development, while the other segments are almost zero in growth, almost flatline. Where does that come from?
I mean, what we see there is, if we take a look back in the, let's say, whole industry a couple of years back, we saw that there were industrial systems on the one side and, let's say, low budget systems on the other side, comparing, let's say, an Ultimaker and an EOS PVF system, for example, where the difference was, let's say, I buy my system for 5,000 euros or I buy my systems for 200 or more thousand euros. So there was really a struggle. There was not really a solution for the mid-size system or for the, let's say, affordable system. Let's say call it prosumer or whatever you want. And we see that market has now been touched a couple of years back already by suppliers like Formlabs, Nexa 3D, Photocentric. All those players have really stepped into that market where they are providing industrial solutions for lower budget. So you, as a user, now have the possibility or the option, let's say, to buy smaller sized systems or smaller cost and lower cost system, and you still get, let's say, industrial quality of those systems. What is really driving that market is, let's say, that the flexibility of those production systems. So if you take, for example, a look at Formlabs systems, you can definitely have a couple of systems standing next to each other. If we take a look at the SLS system from Formlabs, you can have maybe 10, 15 systems, and you have the same investment as if you would buy an industrial SLS system from any of the established suppliers on the market that are long established. So you have much more of a, let's say, flexibility in terms of production. You can run multiple materials, for example, on those systems, and you can overcome, let's say, the pain points of only having one system that you also have to really highly utilize in your production. We see a similar development, as I mentioned before, with suppliers like Photocentric. They have established a footprint at some of the service manufacturers. For example, Merit 3D is an example there. They, I think, have a couple, maybe even 100 systems installed at their facility to really mass produce applications on the Photocentric systems, and those systems on the let's say lower investment side for that reason. So what we really see is that this, especially the mid-size section in this graph, is really picking up on speed and driving the market in terms of unit sales.
Max, how is it on the metal side? I talked briefly about laser count, platform size, but looking at investments, how's the development there?
So we look today into different factors. For example, in part of it, fusion, still the dominating technology. We look into the number of lasers as well as the platform size. We definitely see a market need for the larger systems with more lasers. It's not necessarily that you buy a system with 600 millimeters to produce a lot of small parts. It's usually that you need the size to produce one or multiple large parts for these systems. But of course, these large systems drive the price quite high. So that's one observation we see, but this trend has been going on over the past years. Overall, the average price in metal AM is increasing. It's not necessarily a price creep with the same functionality, but the machines are getting more bigger or are getting more features. These very large systems, simply due to the cost of 2-3 million, are simply driving the price quite high. We see difference in the customer base and the average price per customer base. If you look at the regions, so in APAC, we still see on average the lowest metal AM price for a machine. In Americas, the highest, simply also due to the location of the industries that drive these areas. Overall, though, what you can say in metals is that the gap is widening. So we used to have these medium-sized, let's stay again with part of it fusion, these medium-sized systems with investment cost of around 500,000. euros. And this then increased into both directions. So we have these larger systems, as I mentioned, 2-3 million at the high end. And then we also see quite a big interest into the low-end systems. Low-end not meaning that these are not systems that are not delivering a good quality, but simply low-end on the price. So we can find today on the market multi-laser systems, even at a price point of around 100,000 euros, that are very suitable to produce industrial parts from metals for industries like dental or industrial. So these low-end systems, it's very interesting because they are lowering the adoption barrier into metal AM, which also helps to drive the overall industry. If you have more knowledge in this industry, this is what we need, then we'll eventually also have interest in the larger systems at some point.
Thank you, Max. All right, that brings me to the end of our presentation from the topics we wanted to dive in. Now the big question is, what are your questions in the additive manufacturing market and report developments? Please feel free to use the Q&A session. I hope you can access this, otherwise let us know somehow. I've just posted 2 questions just so you can see it pop up in the team sections. So far, there are no questions yet added. So we give it a couple of minutes. If there are any questions coming up, just feel free. You can, of course, always reach us via the email address you also see here below the link again, or via our website or via LinkedIn. We have several ways of where you can reach us. Generally, we have a couple of things planned for the next year that will happen. We again ask everyone to join our survey. Let's start from the right to the left. In this case, everyone who wants to join the survey for the Additive Manufacturing Report is more than welcome to do so. We always provide a free contributor summary to everyone who's providing data to the AMPOWER report. It's always very interesting talks we have. Every interview we do is let's say phone call based. So we always have an interesting chat about numbers, about market developments. And overall, it always helps the industry to make the right decisions. The more precise data we all have, the better we can all work in this within this industry. Also, I want to invite you to join our AMPOWER studies. For this year, we are having a study in the area of high performance polymer, where we look at the PET, PE, PEAK. I don't know all the short names for it. For the different high performance polymer materials that are in the market, let's say this way. Team was taking care of that study. Me myself, I will look into software for additive manufacturing, especially with focus on part identification. And Max, who's here in the call, will look at high throughput DED technologies and is doing a thorough benchmark in this area. Again, meet us at Rapid and Formex. That's the exhibitions we are every year, also at AM Forum, but that just passed. So go ahead and meet us there in person, and you're always invited for a coffee. Now, Hauke, I see, has posted the first questions. Hauke is asking, do you see changes in terms of metallic materials used? So I think this question is for you, Max. It's going into that direction of where is the alloy segmentation, I assume. So we have a chart on that in the report that's segmenting into titanium alloys, nickel alloys, stainless steels, aluminum, etc. Max, do we see a significant shift there in those alloys, or is that a very continuous development?
Sure. So year over year, the trend has been continuous over the last years. I would say we see nice growth in these alloys used in the sections like aerospace, like medical. So titanium alloys, we see nickel-based alloys. For the future, especially nickel-based alloys are expected from the user side to grow by quite a lot. So this is the projection that we see based on the users we talk to. On the other side, we also have certain areas like steels, stainless steels, as well as low alloy steels. These will also expect to grow. The question is how much over the next few years, depending on the success of these high throughput technologies like DED, like binder jetting. Because of these, if we finally find very good industrial applications, if these industries are ready that are prone to use these technologies, if we can produce with a DED head material 10 kilogram per hour, suddenly we are in a different region what we can manufacture with such a machine and have much higher needs suddenly.
There's another question regarding, will AMPOWER look deep into concrete printing for buildings? I think I can quickly answer that with no. I think at the current stage, we as let's say experts in metal and polymer are not very well suited right now to do a deep insights and analysis of this market. Concrete printing is a complete different market. We certainly keep track of activities that are happening in this area, and we track it in our database. However, the industry is still quite small and fragmented. And from our expertise side, I would probably say within the next 1 or 2 years, we are not going to look into that. We always tend to first build up a certain technical expertise before we proceed into looking into market developments. There's another question from Pelek Decalo. I hope I pronounced that right. What is your take on the low rates of growth in DLP tech? So I assume DLP machines, low rate of growth, low growth in the market of DLP tech, that is well suited to manufacturing applications. Is it well suited, Timo?
Yes, it definitely is. I mean, we see many applications being already produced on DLP technologies, and I don't really agree with, let's say, the low growth rate of the DLP technology. It might not be as high as it was promised a couple of years ago, because I mean, users are at some point, let's say, reaching the level of understanding where they really have to develop applications. And I think that's the major issue of all the resin technologies that are currently out there, because for most of the users, it's really hard to understand what resin technologies are capable of. We have taken a look at many resin technologies, or many DLP printers, especially last year, where we did, let's say, a benchmark of different systems. And what we see is it's not even possible if you are, let's say, choosing one material from Henkel, BASF, or whatever supplier you choose. It's not even possible to really, let's say, get the same material properties on one, or let's say on 10 different printers for the same material. It's really hard to let's say, keep your whole progress, your whole workflow in place. And there are so many materials out there. All the users are completely overwhelmed with their choices that they can do or that they can make. So that's more where we see the problem of DLP technologies. You have to be an advanced user to understand the technology and to really also transfer your understanding, your knowledge to applications. Other technologies like SLS and FDM are easier to get a feeling for, because you can use materials that you maybe have used in injection molding over the last, let's say, 50 years or so. So that's where we see the biggest issue for DLP technologies, to really create an understanding of the technology and of the, let's say, combination of material system and the material system interaction.
Thank you, Timo. Let me look again into the other questions here. Is the gap? Yeah, let me start with this one. Max, that's maybe for you. I'm not sure if you have that ready right away, but is the gap between a buyer and seller forecast increasing, decreasing or stable versus previous years? I think we had a chart published on LinkedIn of PBF unit sales, but that doesn't say much about the global market, right, and the revenues.
I can answer this quickly only for the metal AM section, where most of the data met. So here we had an outlook just for the equipment market, that the user expectations were a bit lower for the next 5 years. So we always ask, the users, how many machines are you going to buy in the next 5 years? And on the other side, the supplier expectations were also a bit lower compared to last year. So the overall outlook decreased a little bit from both sides. However, a little bit higher on the supplier side decrease. Of course, the supplier side is still a bit higher, as they have usually a much more positive outlook.
Thank you, Max. Trying to find my way back in the chat. Timo, do you see a question that is coming up?
There's one more question from Max. Nate stated, you mentioned APAC growth is driven in part due to the unsaturated market. Do you see EMEA market for metal machine sales as becoming saturated? If so, could you elaborate on any reason causing this and how this compares to the North American markets?
I think this was Timo mentioning the saturation of the market, but just answering for metal systems, I don't see the market as being saturated yet today. The market continues to grow. The areas that are making use of metal AM that are in production are still finding out what you can do with it. We have very long R&D development cycles, and now we see more and more companies are being ready, having their processes in place. It's not just the printing process. Companies realize once they actually have a printer and printed the first parts that you need to think about how to post-process it. And this can be actually a bigger headache than the actual printing. So this takes a while to develop. Not sure if there's a direct connection to the North American market. A lot of the drivers in the North American market are defense related, aerospace related. That's what we see today. But we also expect the industrial sector to pick up a lot more in this area. So both regions will continue to grow and make use of metal AM in their respective predominantly areas that they have today.
There's another question. Sorry, Max, again for you. Can you give a little more information about your study on high throughput DD? What are we planning there?
Sure. Best is probably to follow up via email, either to the report at ampower.eu or drop another message with your email here. What we're trying to look at is especially the development in wire-based DED. We see a lot of interest there from the market, and we'll try to get an overview on what's happening laser-based wire DED, as well as other wire DED technologies to see what's really happening. We've seen suppliers at least claim, production speeds of beyond 10 kilograms per hour. And this is good to find out what's really possible and what's not possible, what's going on with the software, and what are best practices for these fields.
Question from Lisa Grimm. Which build volumes will be relevant in the LPBF sector in the future? I think we have a chart in our report that we published on the metal PBF, and I assume this LPBF is relevant for metal PBF in this case. And I think we regularly have a chart where we see the forecast from user and the forecast from the supplier side. And I still remember that in terms of size, I think both forecasts are quite similar, I think. And as far as I remember, the last time I looked at the developments in both the chart around the platform size forecast and the laser count forecast, quad laser systems in the range of 400 millimeter, I think, are the ones most popular in the future. Do I remember that right, Max?
Yeah, trend goes even at smaller systems and metal laser beam powder bed fusion. towards multi-laser systems. This is, I think, a general trend, even for the smaller systems. We will have a larger number of very large systems. The small systems will have their place as well. In industries like dental, these small systems in industry, also, job shops, they can easily purchase a machine now with affordable prices. So these smaller systems will also have their place. But I think the same is for polymer laser beam part of it. Fusion. Not sure what the question meant, but maybe we covered that as well. Timo, what happens there?
I mean, we do not really have a segmentation into the build volumes. What we do is we take a look, let's say, in industrial and not let's say, at the lower budget systems. But what we see there is, of course, I mean, as I stated before, the lower sized systems and the lower cost systems, they really pick up in speed. And many companies are now also focusing on the, let's say, lower end systems to get the foot into the market. We see a similar development there that was seen in the FDM market a couple of years back, where you really spread, let's say, the word regarding the technology with lower sized entry systems. I have now seen an SLS system, I think, for 3,000 euros or so on the market. So that is really, putting some pressure on the established suppliers.
I think overall it will be positive for the market. Maybe the revenue will not increase as much as it did the years before through those smaller machines, but applications will grow because the entry hurdle is lower.
Yeah.
And I think this definitely is positive and generally from a user perspective and from a market perspective. There's another question from Hauke that we haven't answered yet. What do you think about use of metal PBF in consumer electronics industry? I think it's interesting because in consumer electronics, I think we mostly saw applications on the polymer side. So far. It's a significant segment that we, I think, also separately show in the report. We don't do that on the metal side yet because I think this market is still quite small, the consumer side. What do you think, Max? Is that something that we will segment further in the next couple of years? Will that grow?
So it depends on what you are looking for exactly, or what your definition is, Hauke, on the consumer electronics. So if the printing of what we had last year, I think in the media, the housing of the Apple smartwatch, this is a question, hey, can we really do this cost effective? Consumer electronics, but might also be the whole high-tech area. So the use for semiconductors, this is an interesting field also for the semiconductor companies. I believe there's a conference coming week between organized by ASML in the Netherlands. They seem to have a big potential. Nikon also partially active in this field. They invested into a part of it fusion company. So there seems to be interest driven also from the past in the developments there that might drive the use in this industry as well. For end parts, it's always the question, even in consumer electronics for printing, as I mentioned, the housing. Can we do this cost effective even for large scales? Do we really need customization? Do we have benefit from using AM? That's usually the question. Or is maybe some other tool-based process at the end cheaper?
Thank you, Max. All right, I don't see any further questions.
There are a couple of questions in the chat as well. So maybe going into one from Aaron Pearson. How is the interest in renewable polymer material like PA11 looking? I think you can state in general that everybody is taking a look at sustainability. However, I mean, it always depends on the cost of the technology that comes with this more sustainable claimingly a more sustainable solution. So we see a development towards PA11. We see a drive towards more sustainable materials like a recycled PLA, for example, or ABS or whatever it is. However, it comes always with the note that it has to be price competitive. And this is really important to state on that end. Yeah.
One question from Kai Beckmann. What is your global market coverage? Mentioned that S&P Global claims they cover about 98% of the global car market. So for us, what we currently can say from our data, we have around 90% plus of the suppliers first-hand data on the metal AM side. I believe in polymer it's a bit lower. Also a bit different, different market. On the user side and metals, we cover around 10 to 15% of the installed metal AM systems today with our user interviews. And that is then used to scale up to the market. So that's approach there. Also here in polymer, it's a bit lower, I believe, below around 5-6%. So a bit lower than what we have in metal AM. It's a bit more fractured market.
Maybe to add there, 90% give direct data, which means there's the remaining 10% that in some cases we have to scale up where we don't receive direct data. I think we're quite proud of the high number of direct responses we get. We pay a price by that by not publishing directly company-related data. Maybe unlike some other reports that are out there, we only publish aggregated numbers, but this gives us a very high response rate of the supply chain of equipment, material, and part manufacturing suppliers. And I think especially in the equipment side, we have an extremely good coverage, I would say. So now I realized we have to switch between two different chats. I think it's some room for optimization from Teams here. I'm just checking the other Q&A chat if there's additional questions, but I don't see anything. Have I missed anything? I don't think so, right?
I don't think so. No.
Coming to an end anyway.
Maybe one more here. What comprises most of what is in that industrial category? Industrial category, yeah, that's a good one. I mean, in the end, industrial is a hard to catch segment, but in most cases, industrial are machine builders of traditional machines. For example, robotics is an industrial. Everything that has to do with automation, food processing machines as an example, or packaging machines, and any other examples. Tooling, molding, we explicitly separated because it's quite a large segment. But everything that is, that has this industrial background. Companies for cigarette machines, for example, if I think of one of the locals here in Hamburg, Hauni, or of forklifts, if I think of Stihl and Jungheinrich here also in Hamburg, those type of companies. Max, you want to add anything to that?
No, it's sometimes a bit of a gray area, how companies or how suppliers categorize this. So industrial is usually a fairly large group, but at one point then difficult to single out another segment for us.
I think what's very common to the industrial segment overall is that it's usually a group of highly skilled people, but the use of additive is quite limited to a small group of people, small team, often just one or two machines, a couple of polymer machines, one metal machine maybe. That's often the typical footprint of an industrial company you see out there. Okay, it's almost 5 o'clock, and I think we have answered all the questions. Don't see any more. Thank you very much, everyone who was in the call today. Again, let us know if you have any further questions. Feel free to reach out to report@ampower.eu or visit the website. Thanks also once again to all the contributors. Like Max said, we've done around 300 interviews in this time frame. It's extremely exhausting for our side, but also for everyone who has to endure our calls every year again. Thank you very much for all the contribution. We hope that the report is supporting the whole industry to grow in the end and make use of additive. Thanks a lot, and see you at one of the exhibitions or in the next Teams call, face to face. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you very much. Stay in touch, guys.